as well. Number 4 and 5 next up for the chopping block as BDD can only run away. They are the first in the semifinals, and who can really stop this team?
Welcome everyone to Worlds Tonight, live from Guangzhou after the first day of quarterfinals. I am joined here by Papasmithy as well as Deficio, and I have to say this is quite interesting because you guys haven't talked to each other yet. You were on the caster desk, you were on the analyst desk after what transpired today. So try and keep it, you know, not too long, but I think there's a lot you guys have to say about today's matches.
There's always the all-fair, but the result, I mean, that's the first thing, right? This was the one no one saw coming.
Exactly, no one saw it coming. Let's pull up the bracket. We had that Longzhu versus Samsung matchup, and most people thought that this would be an easy match for Longzhu, a convincing match for Longzhu, I should say, even though we hadn't lost faith in Samsung at all. But this level of blowout, Deficio, I don't think a lot of people had expected that.
No one. I mean, based on all the evidence we have from summer split, from group stages, you cannot predict a 3-0 stomp in favor of Samsung. I think you can make a case for Longzhu taking 3-0. A lot of people did that as well, which I think is perfectly fair. It would never be easy games because Samsung is still a good team. Obviously, they will have some answers to what Longzhu are doing, but the fact that we saw such a huge difference between the Samsung in group stages and the Samsung we saw today, especially individual performance, like the execution was just spot on from Ambition, Crown, even Ruler, guys who's not been showing up in the group stage. Like, it's one of those things where you just got to respect it.
Yeah, you do. Just to bring it up, there was, in terms of pick'ems, 83% of people that have taken Longzhu to win this match. And Papasmithy, I want to give you credit where credit is due. You didn't come out and say it publicly, but behind the scenes you told us, guys, I don't think this is as clear-cut. I think Samsung might take this, and you were actually quite confident that they had a very big chance.
Not to the point of predicting it, right? Because I think, you know, you're first a slave to the available data, and the recent data definitely showed Samsung glaring mistakes. Samsung really making a lot of different decision-making, pick, ban. The group stage was not great for Samsung Galaxy, but then you think about Longzhu, you know, it was a convincing 6-0. They had one game against the Gigabyte Marines, the biggest comeback so far in this tournament, but otherwise it was one-sided. But Samsung has that intangible. I think they have experience. We know they have a big experience advantage over the enemy team, but their preparation, when they're given a bit of time, when they really have a goal to focus for, they can just come in over-prepared. And I mentioned on the cast, I had about 5 bullet points where I was like, if Samsung doesn't want to get run over, so not necessarily how Samsung win, but how Samsung actually go competitive, they need to do this and this and this, and they actually checked off almost all of them in this display.
And that's, I'm not going to cut you off. I just want to dive straight into game one and what we saw from them there. That was so good. Deficio, I also had an interview with the guys, and I believe Kuve it was who said, well, we trained very hard on team fights. That was one of the things that was our big focus coming in, and I think that definitely showed straight from the get-go.
Yeah, because in game one, like, this was the closest of the 3 games. It was actually pretty heavily in Longzhu's favor after the early game, where the Malzahar pick didn't work at all in the laning phase because you got counterpicked by Syndra. But then we get these team fights where we start seeing basically Samsung outplay Longzhu, and Longzhu makes some mistakes I don't feel like we have seen so far in this tournament, especially BDD took his entire advantage and threw it in the trash can.
And I think it's interesting that QV really focused on team fighting was our way to win, because a lot of teams didn't even get to the team fighting phase against Longzhu Gaming, specifically in LCK, but also at Worlds. They're a very good proactive team playing around vision. When they can set the tempo, they are outstanding, but they got to the team fighting phase because they really tightened up their early game, their vision control, Ambition invading for vision. They were the ones setting basically the speed of every game we saw here. And yes, when it got to the team fights, they also looked great at that.
And also, I just want to, in general, highlight how important mid lane priority is for both teams, especially for Longzhu in their way of playing is so often to have push in mid, and then you have BDD who can go to top lane and play around Khan if he's on a big carry, or even go bot lane if necessary. We've seen that doing Worlds a few times because it's an ardent sense of meta. This series, after early laning phase in game 1, the Malzahar pick actually took control. There was no QSSs other than on the AD carry on the side of Longzhu. They could never push forward in mid and face check. So suddenly Crown and the rest of Samsung controlled mid. Game 2 and 3, Crown basically controlled mid the entire game long. And they were so key because BDD had a really rough series. And he was one of those players who we were really hyped about going into this quarterfinal.
Well, yes, I mean, it feels bad to call out the different people, but we are in a World's quarterfinal. There were question marks even before the group stage about some of the players on Longzhou, how would they perform? And it's unfortunate that it seems that today these players weren't able to perform.
And it was kind of a multi-pronged thing, right? Sure, BDD had a down series. I think Cuz, for the first time, was a bit exposed. He was on Jarvan twice. We've all mentioned many times, Cuz is usually on Gragas or largely going to be more of a farm jungler, like a Kha'Zix, for example. And on the top, it's going to be Khan, who goes onto the Jarvan. But they relied on him for primary engage a lot. And primary engage, when you're behind, is either picture perfect or your enemy team will grow a lead. If you make the wrong initiation as a tank, mess it up, and on a rookie player in his first split, it's a lot to ask. Things kind of just exacerbate, and there was no kind of space for them to make mistakes, and then the mistakes started to come.
And it went faster and faster. It accelerated from the side of Samsung. And as we take a look at game 2, I think this is where we also praise Samsung and some of the individual performances. You mentioned Crown already, and I don't know if you guys completely agreed on how good his performance was, but I'd say in team fighting for sure, and also in lane, Crown had a great showing.
I think this was one of the best Talia games I've seen, especially here on the world stage when you're playing these super important games. The fact that he's able to bounce back after dying to the first gank, also due to a Shen ulti that was very important, and obviously a Longzhou team who took a fight they shouldn't have grabbed. After that, every single wall was insane. So impactful for the fight itself. He was able to join every single team fight as well, and I don't know, I was so impressed with Crown, especially in this game, and then also the next game where he has the Lissandra pick, and I felt like he had BDD under full control.
I mean, when I see Crown here, the only word that comes to mind is class. You know, we know this guy is hyped as a great top laner, mid laner, top 2 in the world as a mid laner next to Faker. Last year, great summer split, spring split, where he was the MVP. We come into summer, you have a downturn in form, and every great player will go through some purple patches, but also one of these struggling patches, and that's what happened here with Crown. But this is the sort of series where you have to get up, otherwise you're eliminated. Your year is over. And he got up with aplomb. It was a very good performance from him in trying circumstances, whereas BDD, in his first World's Best of 5, left a lot to be desired.
Well, and the only lane we haven't mentioned yet either, Ruler, together with Core JJ, up against Prey and Gorilla, notoriously the best bot lane probably in the world, or one of them. And before this, we can't say that anymore. And how much of that was that the bot lane outplaying, or how much of that was that Samsung as a team becoming aligned?
I think it was a lot the latter, honestly, because I think Prey and Gorilla, it was pretty much the same story. Jungler's never there. But if you think about it, who else wasn't there? Because the big story to me, and I think it was definitely on display in Game 3, is, again, it was usually BDD that was there with the Talia, with the Galio roaming bot lane. Even if the jungler's not there, they would often be in a 3v2 scenario, but they never got visits from the mid lane. The jungler predictably wasn't there either. And sure, did they lose the maximum? No, but they weren't really a pillar of the team because the team around them just wasn't getting anything done.
Yeah, I think this was like almost impossible for Prey and Gorilla to do a whole lot in terms of 2v2 laning, because there was also Shen in 2 of the games who could always go down with ulti, and a jungler, Ambition, outplaying the enemy rookie jungler. So almost impossible in the laning phase. I do want to say that Prey in team fights disappointed me in this series. I know it's very easy now, they got 3-0, but especially in the first series on Xayah, where they need to win, they have no Ardent Sensor, they have this comp that they want to just like punish his Malzahar pick before he gets too strong as well. 2 fights in a row, no Xayah ulti being used at all. He gets CC'd, he dies. Okay, they don't get the advantage they're looking for. And later fights in the next few games as well. I needed the awesome, perfect Prey from groups to try and carry this game here because his team is falling behind. We didn't see it. It was almost impossible for him to do, but he could have definitely done more. Laning phase, I think it's hard to ask for much more.
Oh, definitely is. But when it comes to those team fights, that's a very expensive off day, of course, because we went into Game 3, and the question was, will Longzhou be able to pull this back? And there was a glimmer of hope. You know, we had a composition that we liked a bit more out of them, but in the end, it feels like it was too far gone for Samsung because they pressed that go button and they didn't let up.
It was interesting because Game 1 was Longzhou trying something on the blue side. The Thresh pick didn't work. Game 2, it felt like they were dictated to by the side of Samsung. In Game 3, they got what they wanted. They got the Talia. It looked like finally they were getting a Longzhou-esque comp, but Samsung didn't even need to show their counter strategy until a 2-0 lead had already started.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you spend these few days on finding a pick to one of the best champions in the game in Talia, again shows good preparation. And that is what the really good teams in best of fives can do. Think back to SKT and Faker always having a new counter pick ready when it goes into BO5s, and you always feel like you can't blind pick the same champions against him. BDD and Longshu felt the same thing right here, and obviously add the Shen on top of that. You have a Lissandra with a Shen, add then a Taric ulti on top of that. You have an unkillable Lissandra who can dive your back line, and it never goes to full late game where Lissandra runs out of any sort of like threat. You can just always keep forcing fights before it's too late.
And that's what they did. And before we draw our big conclusions, we also have an extra clip, I believe, of an extra competitor that took to the stage. Before that game 3, I think there was a fly giving Crown some trouble. I don't know if we got to see this on the live stream. And yeah, it was all of a sudden 6 versus 5. But
Longshu fly.
Longshu fly. It was Spy brought in there. But in the end, Samsung make it, Longshu don't. So the big question is, we were completely ready to call Longshu the favorites who could upset possibly SKT or whoever makes it to the final. Are we prepared to say the same thing after Samsung after this game?
I think you're tempted to, right? You see them win in emphatic fashion over, the consensus, favorites. I imagine the Pick'ems would have Longshu winning as by far the favorite, and you're tempted to. And it very may well be there. Like, there is kind of an air of inevitability about will it be SKT versus Samsung again? Certainly a possibility. But I think you can hope. Tomorrow will tell us something on that one. But I do feel like against, say, Team WE, which is a possible semifinal here, it may be a struggle. I feel like stylistically, they had the perfect read on an opponent they'd played multiple times this year, came in with great preparation and took them down. And sure, they may do that again. But I think it will be a very interesting best of 5. If it was Longshu versus WE, I would have been heavily on the side of Longshu. Suddenly, we may actually get a very competitive inter-region match.
I mean, we had in group stages a Samsung team with weird drafts and some players not stepping up individually. Both things were completely fixed today. That gives me a lot of confidence in Samsung going all the way to the final. And even if they face SKT there, it's not a 3-0. They're going to take that series just like last year and probably go all the way to 5 based on what we saw today, because individual performance and draft was spot on.
That would be all the same as last year, but the big question is, can they go that extra mile, because they were so close last year?
Impossible to predict.
What a heartbreak it would be. Well, I'm still going to ask you a couple of times, but not right now. Let's take a look at the bracket. As said, WE or C9 is next up for Samsung, and tomorrow we have Misfits versus SKT. Yeah, well, that is the biggest underdog story I've ever seen in my life in a league matchup in a quarterfinal, I would say. Or does Papasmithy not agree?
It's right up there.
Yeah.
It's surreal to say that with SK Telecom this year, there are areas of the game that Misfits could attack. Is that going to be enough for them to win the series? That's where the betting man really has to start rolling the dice, because it is heavily SKT focused, but we would have said the same about Longshu today, and our percentages were definitely
not as
off.
heavy. Not as
our
heavy.
percentages were off today. Tomorrow, they're going to be much more one-sided than today, but I know the EU fans want to believe.
I mean, and they should believe, especially in the whole Misfits story, in Misfits early game, the fact that these guys are actually looking forward to playing SKT. They said, yeah, we want that team. We can try and win early on. Can they close the games? Probably not. That we have to be realistic here. Like, this is almost like a 95% in SKT's favor going into this series, just because we know also for best of 5 they're going to be even better than in the group stages. So it's super tough. We've only had now, ever since we made the new format, so since 2014, 3 second seeds actually beat the first seed in the quarterfinal. Funny enough, we just had, of course, Samsung.
We're out of first seeds now.
We're basically out of the winners, but we still have 3 first seeds
winners,
left.
my apologies.
There you go. Funny enough, actually, the first time a second seed beat a first seed, it was OMG against Najin Whiteshield. Gorilla was on that team. Also lost 3-0 in that series, and it happened again, but
it happened today means we don't have that tomorrow.
Will probably not happen tomorrow. Will be the 4th time. Would be kind of weird if it happened twice during one tournament.
Yeah, it would. And as you say, also in terms of play styles, we have the SKT that hasn't done too hot early, actually pretty bad, but is great at defending. And Misfits, for all the fire they show in the early game, they've had a lot to shore up when it comes to closing out games. And you just think that even if SKT is not playing to their level yet, they are still miles ahead of Misfits.
Yeah, I mean, if they can come back from the deficits they were behind against EDG, particularly seeing Misfits be able to close out 3 games in a world, again, where suddenly they're outplaying them in the early game 3 games in a row, which already seems unlikely. The same sort of adaptation from Samsung we could see in terms of SKT's early game. That's where you just can't make a confident prediction unless it is SKT picking up the win.
Final thoughts, Deficio?
I mean, 100% agree. I think I mean, the most likely result is 3-0. I can see Misfits in the first game come out swinging and do really well. We've seen SKT drop first games before and then just instantly make adaptations and bounce back for the next few games. But even that first one, like SKT will respect them. They will have studied the early game, figured out what it is Misfits are doing, and they should be ready to take the series.
Right. Well, a big reality check for European fans, but also the setup for the most epic upset in League history. But it's going to be very, very tough for Misfits. But we'll see what they can do, and we'll see it tomorrow because we'll be back with SKT versus Misfits, our second quarterfinal here from Guangzhou. Good night.
Welcome to Summoner's Rift, and ladies and gentlemen, quarterfinal 1 of the 2017 League of Legends World Championship starting right now.
Certainly not going to say that in the mid lane.
Flashes in, go! He knew the damage. BDD gets a solo kill the third time around, pushing Crown out of lane.
One more attack will slay him. The passive going to try to time out. Oh, what a vision! Charge in the back for it.
Here comes the wall. There's nowhere for Lockton to go. Ulti pop as well. They're going to be durable for this one. One kill, make it a second one. The barrier pop means nothing, and the second kill comes in 2-0 in the bot lane. Samsung Galaxy will not be stopped. Crown, perfect kill for the patient. A sub 30-minute game 2 win for Samsung Galaxy. Cuz gonna face second one vision. Suddenly it's gonna be 4 versus 1, and there's simply no way out. Explosive cast buys a second, but it doesn't matter. First blood for Crown. Trundle drops a second as well as Cuz is gone. The rocket jump forward. Ruler wants a third. They're gonna get a stun on Prey. He's to lose his life as well. There is nothing left to stop Samsung Galaxy as they take down their first opponent. They are the first in the semifinals, and who can really stop this team?